So welcome back to another month of Creative Edge tutorials. In this month's video, I'd like to show you how to artfully craft these hand-woven Midollino and Bindwire strips used in my Inviting Handmade Details Bouquet. Not only did the artful shaping of this prepared structure help define the shape of my final bouquet, but it provided the interplay for man-made, handcrafted with nature's texture. So for this structure, you'll need the following ingredients. You'll need a chicken wire pillow, a Midollino extender, Midollino and Bindwire woven strips, and of course Bindwire to put it all together. So first, we're going to start with building the Midollino Bindwire woven strips. So this is what we were intending to build right here, like this. So what you need actually is Midollino sticks, and you're going to need actually 6 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 pieces. So we're going to start up by taking 2 pieces, sort of butt them together so that they're even. And I'm going to take the hot glue gun, and I got it actually on low setting so that it doesn't just ooze out real quickly. All we need is just a little dab because today I've run out of glue dashes. So I'm using the hot glue gun. So what I'm going to do is take that surface with a glue, and I'm going to take a little piece of bind wire and attach it inward and over the 2 strips, and then I go and bind it around and around to cover that bind wire that I have initially laid down. So essentially that's how we start out, like this. And we're going to do the same for the next pair and the pair after. And then you're going to take a rather long piece, maybe 3 feet, maybe even longer than that. Not too long, because you have to thread it through the Midollino, so you don't want it too long that it tangles up, but you want it long enough so you don't have to keep adding. And you're going to take the very first piece, the pair that we started with, and basically I'm going to start by wrapping it around again. But now what I'm going to do is take one of the other pair, and I'm going to wrap that around all 4 pieces of Midollino. And then I'm going to take that other pair and put it on the other side so that basically you have the longest piece, the first pair that I started, and then the second and third set of pairs to add alongside of it. So this is basically so that you can get sort of a pointed effect on these strips of Midollino. So I'm going to wrap that around the whole thing. And then now we have to start to separate so that we can get that nice strip of weaving started. So the first what you're going to do is after the first pair on the right, you weave it under the second pair, the middle, and then you bring it over to the other side so that you're weaving under and over. So this is kind of how you're starting. But once you get that done and string it across, using the bind wire to string across and weave around, now you're going to go in behind and weave in and out so that it actually start to weave the 6 pieces together under and over. You're going to push it. It's just like any kind of weaving. You're creating wefts and you're needing to just push it up to tighten it up. So now after you've done basically 2 rows of weaving in and out, what we're going to do is on either side, the either pairing on the right and the left, we're going to wrap around it, so that you actually wrap around and then weave under and over. and bring that up. And then on that right hand pair, again, as I flip it around, you're gonna wrap it around so that now we're separating each pairing. We're separating it, but we're still weaving in and under and over. So again, on the right hand pair, you wrap around with a binder, wrap it around, and then under, like that. And then wrap it around, pull it up, and under and over. So that becomes the weave. So you just continue to do that. Always remember on that either pairing, you're wrapping it around before you weave under and over. The problem with just continuing on with this is you have really no control over the width of this strip that you're creating. And you want it to sort of flare out a little bit so that it's tapered outward. And then at some point, you might want to flare it back in. And so how do you control that width? I just want to show you how to do that right now. So what I want to do is I want to make this flare out so that it gets wider and wider. Maybe something like this. Because if you just continue on without using the next measure I'm going to show you, it's just going to kind of collapse into as tight as possible, and it just becomes a narrow piece. But if you want the taper, what you have to do is you have to actually take a piece of bindwire. It doesn't have to be long because this is just to gauge it. So just to get it to the width that I want, what I do is actually do a wrap around. Like I'm just going to do it to here. Wrap it around a couple of times so it's nice and tight. So I want it to taper out about that much. So now I'm going to wrap around that couple times like this so that it stays that width right there. And then likewise, I'm going to just do it evenly on the other side as well. So that you actually set up a gauge that help it flare to that width. So this is what you're looking at. So now we can continue what we were doing before. So I can just do that same weaving back and forth. But now it's going to flare out evenly to the width that we're aiming for, just down the road here a bit. So you're just going to continue doing that. So I got about this far with a piece of bind wire, that long piece about 4 feet that I had cut to weave in. And you can see how it's tapering beautifully up to that kind of the grid that I created to keep it that width. Now, if I want to continue on, I will just add on another piece of bind wire, just right in here, and then move that up a little further so that that becomes a continued gauge for the width of this particular strip. So that's kind of how I did some of the pieces that I created here. Is I tapered it a little bit, broadened it out, created a gap, and then did another section. So each time I do this, I'm actually creating like a spacing here so that it goes exactly into the kind of width that I'm looking for. The reason for some of these spacing and leaving this sort of gap is that it gives you actually an opportunity for some of the materials, whether it be vines or branches or whatever that you might design into this, it can weave in and out of it. Also, flower stems could be placed so that it's coming in over and slipped in and out. I mean, it just gives you an opportunity for your flower stems to weave through the weaving itself, the handmade weaving itself, that makes it so that the combination of fresh and man-made, handmade, crafted item, that it sort of marries it together. That's the beauty of it, and that's sort of the excitement that I enjoy. So the next step is I'm going to take the chicken wire pillow, and then I'm going to now bind wire the woven strips. That's these woven strips of Midollino and Bindwire into an artful way to then create the cascading silhouette. So let's just go and take a vase so that we can sort of start to see how this is going to develop. So I have actually 3 strips that's been created. And I'm also, as I mentioned earlier, in the ingredient, we also have the Midollino extender, because this is always used as sort of the backbone of the cascade piece. So I'm going to take this and twist it and try to figure out a way that this would weave the nicest. Let's see. So let's first start with taking the bind wire and having the short pieces already cut. So we're ready to bind. So let's start with, I'm gonna first start by holding it, and finding spots to tie makes it a little bit easier. And once we get it starting to shape silhouette of a cascade, then we're gonna place it on top of the vase so you can see how it falls and shapes. With a cascade, I usually like to have a little bit of a sort of a backward flow. So this is going to be the back side of the bouquet, so that there's a little bit of that. Let's just attach this as well. The more points that you attach, the more secure it becomes, the whole thing. And because of the fact that most of these, the Midollino extender and the Midollino and bind wire weaving are going to be the point of attachment for a lot of the vines, the fresh vines and flower stems. You want to make sure that it's really quite secure. So I'm going to attach to the back and to the front so that you have sort of a swirling effect of the Midollino extender to give you. So really what I want is maybe something like this. Just remember with the Midollino extender, because it has the yarn surface, it's also possible to use it as a surface for gluing. If you have odd flowers like Phalaenopsis blossoms or Cymbidiums that are not, maybe they fell off the stem, well, they could also still be glued so that it can be part of the final finish. So maybe something like this to start. So it's like this. And I'm gonna actually kind of bring it sort of forward off the table for me so I can kind of get more of the cascading feel. And I'll sort of flip it after I kind of attach it in a few places so that you can see. So don't worry about the ends of these bind wire at the moment. We'll clip them all off, just cut it off clean at the same time. It's just a one sweep kind of a process. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is start out by adding in, just weaving in some of these strips so that it starts to be almost like sort of a woven piece, almost like a basket-like surfaces that flows through and downward. So maybe with this one, I'm going to the side and attaching in all the spots so that it hugs the silhouette of this bouquet. So just so you can see, this is kind of what's happening already. You can see that it has this beautiful bend from back forward, and it's attached in various spots so I can get the curvatures that I want. Attached it towards the end of this sort of tendril-like parts of the Midollino extender so that it has that beautiful cascading fall. And then I'm gonna take the next piece, and now I'm gonna weave it, and maybe in a slightly different direction. Maybe I'm gonna actually bring it over into the front so that I'm going a little bit sideways with this one. So that these strips themselves, these woven strips, are now being woven further to create the dimension of this bouquet structure, and also giving it that combination of the handmade versus, it just sets it up so that the interplay of fresh flowers to the man-made pieces will occur. And sometimes, like when you're putting the woven piece into the woven piece, you just want to open up a section of the weaving so that you can easily thread through. So here, just to go into from this and through the other with a bind wire, I just open it up like this into through both strips so that they could be woven together. So this is kind of what I've got now. And I'm going to bring this down on the back side so that it flows kind of like this. I want to create a beautiful movement with these strips so that in a way it's sort of being woven together sort of sculpturally to create the dimension that is going to be this bouquet. So this is how it's turning out right now. So I have one more piece. So let's look and see how we're going to work with that. So now I'm just putting in the last piece, last strip into this, and I want to just make sure that they sort of flow beautifully together, that it adds that little extra something. That's what we're looking for with this sort of handcrafted look. So I'm just sort of playing to see where I like to see this positioned. So I'm just going to keep adding. And you can see that this whole process just builds. It's really weaving the weavings. That's kind of what we're doing here. But you're trying to create also a beautiful silhouette, a beautiful feel for the flow of the end outcome of this design. So, you know, you're creating sort of a woven sculpture into which then we'll be designing our bouquet. This structure becomes the template or the pattern that helps determine the silhouette of the final cascade bouquet. Individual flowers can now slip through the handmade weaving. It's the judgment of the designer to which extent they will keep the structure exposed. Minimal flowering will leave much of the structure exposed for a more graphic look, while additional flowering will show the abundance and robust nature at the hands of man. To read this month's full article, please visit hitomigilliam.com/creativeedge. You'll be able to see all 3 finished bouquets and read the accompanying article for more insights, as well as a list of plant materials and supplies used to create each of the 3 pieces. And if you missed Thursday's Creative Edge Techniques video on how to use fruiting branches in cascading bouquet structures, I've linked it in the description below as well. Back again this month is a limited number of signed 8x10 prints, each hand numbered and signed. This month's print features my Inspired by Structure bouquet. Prints are available to order until September 18th and will ship the following week. If you enjoyed this month's article and today's video, please consider supporting the channel by liking this video and subscribing for future content. And if you're interested in supporting the channel even further, check out my newly launched Patreon page. There you'll find additional in-depth Creative Edge content and exciting new features like monthly virtual workshops, meetups, and much more.